Hi everyone, and this is going to be a quick walkthrough of the second assignment, question 3. And what will be interesting about this one is I want to try to use Mac Excel just to see how different it will be and kind of show those students who are using Macs, give you some tricks here too. If you're using Windows, it should be very similar. The one thing we want to learn, right, is how to kind of adapt between the different styles sometimes, and it's interesting to see the differences between them. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Here we're going to do question 3. We're going to calculate some numerical statistics, so average, median, standard deviation, coefficient of variation to start off with, and then some z-scores. We might throw in a histogram in there just to show you some of the charting options that we've got. All right, so let's take a look here. Going back to Excel. Here are numerical stats that we're going to get. I'm just going to put some labels in: average, median, standard deviation, coefficient of variation. I was at a conference about 2 weeks ago on how to teach Excel for economics, and I learned a really interesting thing. They said that Bill Gates told the engineers when they were developing Excel is like for every operation there needs to be 4 ways to do the same thing, which seems like ridiculous. So there's many different ways. You've probably figured this out too. But there's a lot of different ways. And so that can be confusing sometimes that there's not just one, but you can figure this out too, that there's many ways to always do the same thing. When you're starting out, it can seem really challenging to figure out all those different ways, but in this case, once you figure it out, you can kind of have some idea here. All right, to get our average, we know we just need to select the range. I'm going to come over here to the sales prices. That's what we're looking for. In Windows, you can do Shift Control down arrow. You can do that in Mac too, or you can do Shift Control or Command down. We'll give you the whole, the entire selection of that range that you have there. We've got our average house prices about $85,659. Okay, so those are average. We do the same thing, just going to use the median function. I'll try Shift Command Mac, Control Shift. That shortcut actually saves quite a bit of time. Here we can see this is $72,000. Notice how mine made it money. I'm going to go ahead and make our first one money too. Just change that formatting up there. You can see that we've got. All right, and then the standard deviation. Again, remember we're using the Mac version, but don't worry, this is the same across both versions that we have so far. Standard deviation. Get that range. You can see what those values look like. If yours aren't money, you can always just, again, if you're under the Home tab, change the values that we've got right there. All right, now a couple things just to mention as we look at this. Notice how the average is quite a bit bigger than the median. So if the median is 72,000 and our average is close to 85,659, that's showing that there's probably a few houses that are like really high priced or some extreme values on that right side, pulling that average up. And so that would be an indicator of right skew. That's something that we could kind of say there. We'll make the histogram here in a second, and hopefully we'll confirm that with the visual. It'll show us that the distribution has some right skew, but we can use this here. I just wanted to point that out to show you that's what you're looking for here. So notice how this is bigger. The average is bigger than the median, so there's some extreme values pulling that average up. Standard deviation, close to $50,000. That's going to show the variability across the house prices in our sample. So in this case, that 50,000, it probably shows that there's a pretty wide variety of the housing prices in our sample that we're using, that we've got here. We can use the coefficient of variation to help us justify that suggestion, that result that we have here. The coefficient of variation is just going to be, remember, the standard deviation. So we'll do this one really quick, divided by the average. So we can kind of see how big that standard deviation is relative to the average. And this is not money, so whenever you get kind of a thing that's not formatted correctly, we can actually change this one as a percentage. So this is a 58% that we have here. So that's going to show, again, like we suggested before, a lot of variation that we're looking at in this particular case. So about 58%. Okay? All right, so now we're good to go. Let's make that histogram just to see what it looks like, just to kind of show you how to do it. I'm going to kind of preemptively select the data that I'm looking for here. I want the variability across sales prices, just to kind of get that picture that we're looking at. All right, so I'm just going to select those again. Command Shift down arrow or Control Shift down arrow, either way, just to get that entire block that we've got there. I'm going to make sure to, I'm going to go ahead and click one of these cells so that it kind of knows where to put this chart. Sometimes it puts it at the bottom, which isn't a problem. All right, so then I'm going to scroll back up. Here I got the selection. I'm going to go to Inserts. Again, this is a little bit different for me. I haven't used this one as much, but we can still see we have our same charting options. I'm going to go to the middle here and pick the histogram. All right, and we actually get a pretty nice picture right here. If we wanted to, we could mess around with the bends, but this one gives me a pretty good look and exactly kind of what I was hoping to kind of find, what we have here. Okay. All right. Now we'll show you some kind of things that you can do here. I'll change the chart title. This is going to be a histogram. Sales price. And you'll notice one thing that we want to make sure when we're making our charts is that they're very easy to read. So we need to put our axis labels too. That tells us that we know what we're charting right here, that we're very, very clear on what's going on. So this is the Mac version again. In our version, sometimes we would get like our little plus sign out here that give us our extra charting options, but we're not seeing that. Notice if I click outside, just on the regular cells again, it's just taking me back to do my normal operations that we have here. If I want to go back and do some revisions to my chart, I'm just going to click inside so I can select my chart that I have here. And notice how it's giving me these options: chart design and format. If I play around with these, specifically the chart design, you'll notice it's going to give me some options here. Again, this is a little bit different than the Windows version, but it's still kind of the same stuff. We're going to go to Add Chart Elements. And you'll notice the options are pretty similar to what we would see in the Windows version. All right, so I'm going to add our axis titles really quick. We'll do the horizontal one first. This is sales price. So that's what it's breaking it down by, and then I'm going to do the same thing here to the vertical. You can call this one, these are, in this case, it's the frequency or the count, the number of observations that are happening in these bends. And the last thing, we can just kind of take a look at the picture here. Notice how it is kind of stretched out. Notice how we do have a few houses out on this right tail here that are pulling that average up. That's the right skew. And we observe that in the difference between our average and medians up here. So that's kind of nice. It gives us a nice little thing to work with. All right, let's do our z-scores next. I'm going to go ahead and just put in a couple values here. Sales price. If I remember, I'm going to have to go back and just double check this really quick. I think it was 125,000 and 60,000. And then we're going to go do the min, okay? And then calculate this upper bound. All right, should be able to do that pretty easily. All right, we're going to do the sales price. We're going to put that here, so 125,000. And then I'm going to put 60,000. And this one, I don't know it yet, but I'll put min. And right next to this, I'm going to put z-score. Okay, and then I'm just going to write the equation for the z-score just so we remember it here. You're going to take that x value, you're going to subtract off the average, and divide by the standard deviation. Okay, so that's our equation. We got 3 pieces of information that we need to get here. I'm going to go ahead and just change kind of preemptively. I know these are going to be money, so I'll change those formats of those cells that we have right there and get ready to calculate these z-scores. The interpretation of the z-score, again, it's the number of standard deviations from the mean. So here I can see if this sales price is $125,000, it's above the mean. So that z-score is going to be positive. I'm just looking to see how far it is away. All right, equals. And I'm actually thinking ahead here because I'm going to do like 3 calculations. I don't want to type it every time, so I'm going to try to structure it so that I just need to make it one time and I'll copy and paste the cell. So that's what I'm kind of thinking here too. The equation's similar. The only thing that's changing, right, is our x value here. So if I copy and paste it, I want our equation to recognize and update according to that. All right, so this is going to be my first x value. That's the x value that we have right here. I'm going to subtract off the average. So I'm going to create another reference to our cell right here. Now the average stays the same, right? The average across our sample is going to stay the same, so I'm going to fix it. If you remember in our Windows version, we used F4. In this version, if you're using Mac, Command-T is what is going to give you that fixing function that you have here. So if you use Command-T or F4, if you have a laptop, you might hit the function button F4. But any of the things that will put those $signs in front to fix the row and column operator. Don't forget to close off the parenthesis. Make sure that your parentheses are around that difference right there. That's telling you how far is your value away from the mean. And then that distance is actually relative to the standard deviation. That's what we're checking here, right? So how big is that distance relative to the standard deviation? And there's our standard deviation right there. And similarly, that standard deviation is going to stay the same. So we are going to fix it as well. So use that F4 for Windows or Command-T and Mac to make that operation happen. All right, so now you've got all your pieces right here. You're going to take the x value, subtracting off the average, dividing by standard deviation. Okay. It's giving me money, but this isn't a money. I'm just going to make it a number. If you have a lot of decimal places here, just shrink those up to a couple places. Those extra pieces aren't really necessary. Okay. All right, so this is saying that a house that's valued about $125,000 is about 0.79, 0.8 standard deviations above the mean. And that's actually pretty close. That's not very far. It's still within 1 standard deviation, which puts it relatively close, which you can kind of see here too on our histogram that we've got. If this is our average, and then this is what we're talking about, that value there. Okay? All right. So that'll tell us kind of where how far is that observation from everything else. All right, now here's the great thing of setting up that equation like we had earlier, because now we can just copy. So Control-C or use the copy options over here, whatever is easiest for you. Command-C, I just learned in the Mac version, is how we'll copy this here. And I'm just going to paste, Command-V, paste, to see what our next z-score looks like here. A z-score of $60,000 for a house. All right, notice a couple things. We've got the notice that the sales price is below the average. And so that's why our z-score is negative here, because it's looking at the difference here relative to the average. So this is saying that a house priced at $60,000 is about half a standard deviation from the mean. So that's actually really close as well. It's just below there. Okay. All right, so that's how you can explain that one. Half a standard deviation from the mean, relatively close. It just lies below the mean. All right, let's check this one. And I think this question is going to ask something about, is this an outlier? So what we're checking to see is if the lower value, the lowest value, is going to be more than 3 standard deviations below the mean. If we look at our histogram, so again, we want to kind of get some intuition here too. So just get some understanding. There's right skew, so the extreme values are on the right side. Looking below the mean, it's unlikely that we're going to find outliers. So it's very unlikely that we're going to find a value out here that's going to be 3 standard deviations below the mean, just because of the way the data is structured. Okay, so I know that already. I'm already expecting that this z-score that we calculate is going to be relatively close. I just need to put the value in and check it. Here's the way we can kind of do that. I need to find the smallest value in our data first. The function we can use to do that is min. And I'm just going to select, again, my range of data and figure out what that smallest value is. All right, so the smallest value in our sample, the lowest price that sold is $1,000. And I just want to calculate the z-score associated with this one. I can take either of these equations that are going to work. I'm going to go ahead and copy, again, that cell, paste it, and we can see that this house price at $1,000 had a z-score of minus 1.71, so it's 1.71 standard deviations below the mean, and that is within our 3 standard deviation outlier criteria. So we would say, no, that's not an outlier here. Okay. All right, so one thing you can think about too as you do this for your projects, when you get your data, this is a way to kind of go through and talk about the distribution. You can do the histogram. You didn't have to do that for this problem, but the histograms, the visual, and you've got these numerical measures here to kind of help with this that we've got. So we can kind of put all of this together. You got your numerical stats. You've got a table if you wanted to. We got this breakdown. This is a great descriptive way to describe how your data is distributed. All right. Now our last question I think was asking about calculate. It's a little bit different. Calculate the value of a house that would be considered an outlier. We can kind of come back. What is the z-score? Okay, so this last one, using the z-score criteria, calculate the upper bound above the mean that would constitute an outlier. So a slightly different question that we're asking here. But we can get this one too pretty easily. Let's kind of come down here where we can kind of see what's happening. Move our chart over a little bit. Okay. All right, so it's slightly different. I'll move this down because we'll come back and we'll check this in a bit too. So I'll show you something. Whoop, get out of this stuff. All right. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate. We're going to say, what is this value? What is this upper bound? Is what we're going to try to calculate. Okay. And if you remember the equation for our upper bound that we have, I'll give it to you right under here, right above here, maybe where we got some space and you can see it. We're just going to rearrange this equation, right? And understanding that gives you a lot of help. When we rearrange it, remember we're essentially going to give it a z. We said the criteria that we're trying to meet, 3 standard deviations above the mean. So our upper bound in this case is going to be equal to, maybe we can make a little space here. So we'll say that upper bound is going to be equal to the average plus 3 times the standard deviation. Okay, and that's just rearranging that equation that we had before. Okay. All right, so this one should be pretty easy. We know what the average is. We know what the standard deviation is. If I'm trying to calculate this upper bound, I'm going to do equals. Here, locate my average in my sheet. I'm just going to reference it. Don't need to worry about any fixing this time. Plus 3 times the standard deviation, just like we have right there. Okay, hit enter. We get a value of $234,609.95. So that would be considered our upper bound. Any house prices above that are more than 3 standard deviations above the mean. And so here, I need to check now, are there any cases like that? So we just need to check. I can use my histogram that I have right here, and I can see that there are houses above that. And that's all I'm doing here in this question. Do not feel like it's necessary to go through and list each one. You could do that, right? You could sort the sales prices smallest to largest and do that, but it's not necessary right now. It's possible, but again, not necessary. Let's just check to see. I can see from my histogram that there are some that we're going to say, yes, there are outliers. This is going to definitely indicate that. But another way I can do it is, let's go ahead and calculate the max. We can check and see if that max value is going to be above that upper bound. We kind of know it is already. I know how to use this, equals max. All right, go over to my sales prices. Select the range. we get a max price of $271,000 that we see here. And so we can know that there's at least some outliers that we have here that we've got going on. All right. So we can see then again that this is a case that there's going to be outliers from above. If we wanted to one more time, just to kind of reiterate, since we've done this already, I can calculate, it's going to be easy to do it, I can calculate the outlier or the z-score for that max house price. I know it's going to be above 3. You can see just by copying and pasting that in, you can see that for the max price is 3.73. So this is an outlier. There are outliers above the mean in this particular case. Okay, I hope this just kind of helps a little bit. I plan on trying to do this for every assignment once a week. I'm okay kind of giving you even though I know these are the answers to the problem, given that our class goes so quickly, I think it's good to get just a little bit extra help so you know how this works. You would have to do this on the exam this week, so you're going to still have to do this on your own. So getting a little help, I think, is a good thing. Please let me know if you have any questions, and good luck.